Hello, Dominic. Thank you for joining us today.
Hello, Chris. Good afternoon. Pleasure to be here.
Cool, thanks. So just for the context of the listeners, could you give us a quick introduction for yourself and your project, the PM1 Digital Banking?
Yeah, sure. So my role here at Exposoft is the Group Chief Operating Officer. So this is really a very broad role within our business. To give you a sense of size, we're around 300 people. And fundamentally and primarily, I'm responsible for product evolution. So our product, as you said, is PM1, focusing on digital banking in this discussion. And I'm really responsible for the evolution and the development of this product with, of course, the power of my departmental colleagues behind that. The solution itself, in a nutshell, is a portfolio management system and digital banking capabilities. It's intended for use by most financial institutions for managing the wealth, assets, and investment structures of high net wealth individuals. And our direct customers are typically the banks, independent asset managers, multifamily offices, family offices, and other forms of institutional investment. So our system handles all that, builds up and manages investment structures. And then critically, which is the basis of the work we did with Nomensa, of course, is the digital channel out towards the clients.
Awesome, thanks. So just to follow on from that, from our perspective, what really impressed us the most was the kind of ambition and the ability to cater for some more of those niche markets. So, for instance, that's kind of something that this sector, I think, challenges quite a lot. Like, we want to be able to produce a product that's digitally contemporary, modern, and set to that kind of expectation, but also still be able to design an environment in which we can add that brand application in, and perhaps some instances or some clients and partners may want particularly bespoke features and components. So that was a kind of really exciting opportunity for us to collaborate with you on, and how we can kind of help move that product to that next level. Is there anything that you would say in terms of working with us as partners from an Nomensa perspective that you thought may have brought a new kind of way of thinking or a new way of challenging?
Yeah, I think what's important to appreciate is the domain that we work in as a software provider is in many ways quite a traditional domain. So wealth banking, because it's really not about retail or neobank banking for the majority of people out there, or mass affluent clients, as some banks call them. This is really about offerings for high net wealth, ultra high net wealth individuals, and even investment companies. And they have tend to have a rather traditional view of the world. Therefore, the software that we build for internal use tends to be, well, not particularly spectacular, more function over form. And we're now, and have been now for the past 2 or 3 years, embarking on extending our capabilities into the digital channel out to the clients themselves. So our customers, of course, are the investment companies, and their clients are the investors themselves. Now, investors themselves, of course, have a different demand. They expect something that is fundamentally much more driven by both a combination of function and form. They expect to see the data that they need, the content enrichment that they need, but they expect to see it in a way, because we all leave our lines online now, they expect to see it in a modern, well-presented manner. And this is where our relationship or partnership with Nomensa really bore fantastic fruit, because we don't have a great deal of experience in designing for the end client, the normal or high net wealth person out there. We build more for portfolio managers that want a lot of data on the screen. So working with the Nomensa just helped us realize the importance of certain elements of design, putting enough space in place, making sure the right information is positioned in the right way for the right type of user. And it was this experience that really resonated with us, and we actually learned a lot through the partnership that will extend into how we think about our product design in general in the future.
That's awesome to hear. Thanks for that, Dominic. And likewise, the kind of opening statement we mentioned then, that ability to kind of come in and operate with your insight, and the development team that you had behind you was flexible enough for us to be able to kind of push and pull in those directions. And that wasn't considered something that may have been parked to be put on one side as an MVP. The kind of ambition and drive there from yourself was very much focused on how can we make this the best possible product we can, which was great for us as clients to work and collaborate with you as well. So with that idea of the kind of like partners that you kind of operate with, when we look at the idea of kind of multi-markets and the geographies of where your kind of current client base are, like how important is that kind of concept of user experience to their brand and how distinctive it is in for them?
Well, it kind of in a way goes back to what I stated before about the fact that, you know, in many ways there's surprisingly, a lot of banks and other institutions we work with are not moving as quickly as you might think in extending digital channel out to their clients. Many of them are still really just offering traditional PDF style reports, either sent by email or through post. But times are certainly changing. Some banks are well ahead of the curve, and some are still beginning to enter this dimension. And this persists across geographies. So if we look at Europe in particular, and the UK and Switzerland, there's a tendency to be slightly more advanced towards this. Other geographies in Europe, not quite so much. If we look at Asia Pacific, where we do a lot of business as well, pretty much everybody there, if it's not presented on a mobile device, it's unusable. So this is even further advanced in terms of the expectation of having a well-presented digital channel, even on a mobile. So a website on a laptop or a desktop is not even required anymore or interesting. And in some ways, the Americas are a little bit behind. They might argue differently, but based on our experience, we see all of these different rates of acceleration towards providing a wonderful experience for the client, that they want to engage with this data and this content and really expect that and want it to be their primary way of interfacing and working with their investment advisors. So it's really shifting sands, but we see a lot of acceleration in the market across all geographies taking place right at this moment, which is fundamentally why this project that we did in partnership with Nomensa was really the right project at the right time for us.
Yeah, absolutely. And we've seen that within the sector as well, of our experience. It is very much an environment in which has a lot of space for innovation, especially when we're talking about the idea of going from paper-based to digital. Even that is, like, for some clients, something that is quite a big ambition to take on. With that, I guess, kind of with the idea of your sort of 25 years of experience, like, what would you say is the next biggest challenge within say 5 to 10 years' time?
Well, what we're experiencing at the moment when we're beginning to showcase these new capabilities that we have, so digital engagement for end clients, our clients, the ones that have already deployed it to some degree or are beginning to think about it, they're saying, well, this is fantastic. We want this to be our main point of contact. And they're beginning already to think about the type of content that they want to push through this channel. So it's really not just about the breakdown of portfolio assets and what the positions are that a client holds. It's about communication, active communication. It's about the frequency or how up-to-date information is and the accuracy of information. But it's also about providing relevant client-specific content, so crafted and curated for their use in order to make that channel as potent as possible, particularly, and again, given what I stated about, you know, rates of acceleration in the market, about activating these digital channels, about differentiation, about how do we, if everybody's offering this, how do we become different and represent ourselves in the most effective way when the digital channel becomes the new norm. So all of these aspects are in play at the moment, and the flexibility that we have in the design concept that we created together with Nomensa allows us a great degree of flexibility in terms of how we can restructure information for the needs of different clients according to what their demands are upon us in terms of a provider.
Awesome. That's great. And one thing you kind of mentioned earlier, which I kind of wanted to double back around on, was when we were talking about the different kind of geographies, was this kind of perhaps there's certain markets are a little bit more behind and some a little bit more advanced. Do you think there's going to be a challenge in context with the idea of certain regulatory practices or adopting a better way of accelerating themselves. So this idea of kind of changing certain habits that some countries or regions might be a little bit more reductive for. So what we're saying here is do you think there's a challenge in the idea of something being able to be in a position of where it's advanced enough, but also maybe not as full foot on the steam, so that they have time to kind of catch up? That makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, this is a key part of it. I mean, you've mentioned regulation now. Regulation does drive how much information you can gather, how much you can share. And of course, if we look at the regulatory regimes around client protection in Europe, MiFID, or here in Switzerland, FIDLEG, these govern and control the type of information you need to present and when you need to present it during the client journey. So ensuring that there's not only a channel to share that, but also that it is present enough, that the client realizes that they need to engage with that content, perhaps agree or approve to something in a simple way, not to have to download a document and sign it and upload it or something like this, but really just to click and approve, or something simple and easy to interact with. Integrated digital signatures, using the device capabilities. All of this is critical for those geographies where that type of regulatory regime is in place. As I said, this is very much so the case in Europe. Also in Europe, we have important privacy controls in place around GDPR. And this, of course, governs how much information you can share, under what circumstances, or what information you can gather under which circumstances. So having those controls in place to ensure that the correct levels of data privacy is managed through this channel. This is also an important element of the flexibility we need to have in the product, because indeed in some parts of the world, different more flexible or more open regimes are in place. So this is very much part of the proposition that we have to offer to our customers, so they can in turn manage that relationship with their clients.
Absolutely. I think from a design perspective, one of the most challenging and interesting aspects from that is there's always a kind of, at the start of the project, is like kind of how do we deal with onboarding, and that your onboarding product is always kind of already set up from before we had arrived at the scene, for one of the better term. But that idea of being able to kind of really refine those processes so they're like super kind of fast, and we can utilize perhaps these kind of new technologies around, like you mentioned, essentially biometrics or ways of authentication that doesn't require like lengthy periods. Do you kind of foresee that being something that you have a lot of faith in at the moment, or are we not quite at that level in which these kind of newer technologies could be implemented today?
No, we have to pay attention to them, because technology doesn't stand still. We now have the advent of real usable AI upon us with the various offerings in the market. It's important to not only take advantage of technologies in the right way, particularly those that are present on mobile devices, for example. There is an expectation, and this goes back to what I stated earlier on about differentiation. If our customers are not differentiating by making use of those capabilities, device capabilities, technologies, and communicating the right quality of information to their clients, then they will fall behind in the selection process when a high net wealth client is deciding over one bank or another in which to deposit their assets, or looking at one financial advisor versus another. So we, as a provider, it's incumbent upon us to make sure that our technology and the way that technology renders on the surface of the devices used by the clients is absolutely up to date, and we are taking advantage of either device capabilities or more advanced software engineering capabilities like AI, for example, in the right way.
Sure. I think we should catch up on AI on a separate call, because we've been looking at it quite a bit recently, and I think especially in your kind of your sector, your subject, and lots of discretionary and potential ways that it could be used in a positive and negative light. It's a very interesting space at the moment, but it certainly does mean that if we act with it the right and responsible way, it could be a really nice addition to that that level of experience that you're already offering. Just to kind of like change the question slightly, and I think you may have answered this in many other ways during this course. You've offered us some very kind of rich replies. But in terms of what we kind of really learned and what we enjoyed was kind of understanding the diversity of your client base and their unique requirements. So I'd love to get your perspective on what lessons in sort of experience design, perhaps for want of a better term, you would take away from our work together.
Well, this is a very interesting question because, of course, the users, as I've mentioned before, as the end clients, the high net wealth investors, they come in many shapes and forms, particularly in terms of age, of course, in terms of the demands that they have or the expectations they have on the type of content and how it's presented. So our project working together was in terms of a delivery to a particular customer of ours. But of course, it was important that we were able to create a product which could be used across our entire customer base, not just we don't develop for one individual customer, but rather a product that we can configure for many. And we think this was a very successful output or outcome of the work with Nomensa, to be able to design something that not only would work across the demands of different customers, whether it's a bank or an external asset manager or a family office, but also to consider, well, how do we present information in a way that's comfortable for someone of 70 or 80 years of age compared with someone that lives online, perhaps, that's more in the early 20s? Because the experience of digital engagement is different, and therefore the expectations are different. And so we need to be able to cater across all of these dimensions, of course, language as well, how to represent information in different not only languages, but scripts. So Arabic or Cyrillic, for example, all of these elements are critical as well. So flexibility and coherence together are fundamentally important. And this is something I think we really managed to tackle well during the course of this project.
That's great. And another thing, I suppose, which is quite interesting in this project, especially when we're looking at like the digital spectrum, is a generational thing, right? So there'll be a kind of a particular client or partner that will have a wealth of investment that would then maybe pass that on, and it would be a younger audience that would take on that wealth, and then they would be expecting to handle their affairs in a different way. You know, they would want to be able to perhaps to be a little bit more hands-on, a little bit more collaborative, try and take a little bit more control, perhaps be slightly more digitally entrepreneurial from that perspective. So it's interesting as well with this solution, of course, kind of like provides not only that process in which we are catering for, like I said, more an accessibility perspective in terms of the language offering and that idea of being able to make sure that the B2B and the kind of customer can use this interface, but also that it can impact those different generational gaps and expectations as well.
And indeed, I think you mentioned accessibility. That's another dimension as well that's really worth commenting on. That was something also we learned a great deal about through the interactions with Nomensa, just understanding what that actually maps onto in terms of user interface and user experience, how people of different capabilities are able to interact with the device as well. So, and yes, an important point also.
Cool. Thank you for that. So just to round it up then on just one last question, if we were to focus in two areas, one kind of being more strategy focused, one being more creative and design focused. First, from the more strategy side of things. So looking at that kind of key deliverable really, which is this nice kind of flexible, component-driven product that you were able to then kind of like add a skin on to bespoke for each client or whatever client may come along in this sector. Like, what was that kind of like key value to you from more of that strategic perspective?
Oh, incredible. We've already showcased the design work that we did in this particular project for our common customer, this bank, and we've demonstrated this now also in a more independently styled version for other customers of ours and other prospects, and feedback has been very positive indeed. In fact, this very afternoon I had a meeting with a customer, showcase this, and it's really game changing, I would say, for the way in which we are able to further our interests in the market, both with existing customers and potentially new ones. So strategically, yes, as I said, rather game changing for us.
Awesome. And then just to kind of flip that slightly onto more of the creative side, without giving too much away, is there a particular feature, component, or design that had a special place in your heart?
Many, but if I were to pick out one, our previous design was rather static in terms of its the ability of the client themselves to make any changes to the layout of information. It was pretty much preset. Like it or not, that was how you had to interact with the information, the way it was presented. Nomensa designed a sidebar with the capability to reorganize information on the screen in a very clean and simple way, just being able to switch panels on or off and then reorder them in a remarkably accessible way and very, very modern styling. So this has been a standout feature. It may sound relatively simple, but in terms of the impact on the design and the capabilities of the product, it's been received very positively, both within our organization and also by those of our customers and new prospects that have seen the solution. So this was very positive.
No, thank you. That's wonderful feedback. So that about wraps up our questions, Dominic. So thank you so much for your time. I think it was really insightful for our listeners, and yeah, it was great. It was great to see you again.
Same, Chris. Thank you very much for the opportunity to talk together today. I very much appreciate it, and I hope we meet again.